Remember when I reviewed Skyfall and I said I wish that that was the end to Daniel Craig's run as Bond? Well, after seeing Spectre, I still stand by that statement. Spectre is the fourth and possibly last Bond movie to star Daniel Craig, and brings back Sam Mendes, who directed Skyfall. In this movie, Bond is after the secret organization that target that he took out in Mexico was a part of. He's joined with this young woman whose father had some history with that organization called Spectre, and it leads to Bond finding out some more personal matters in terms of his history. I reviewed all the Daniel Craig Bond movies beforehand, but here's a brief recap. Casino Royale, while I think it's a tiny bit overrated, it's still really good. Really great introduction to Bond after the last Pierce Brosnan movie. It's awful. And it was really good. Quantum of Solace, I don't think is as bad as many people say it is. It's definitely entertaining. It has some great moments, but the villain sucks. And there's some aspects that are kind of wasted. But I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. But yes, in comparison to Casino Royale, it is a disappointment. Skyfall is my favorite. It kept the more down-to-earth aspect of the Daniel Craig Bond movies, but brought in many elements from old Bond and created a perfect Bond movie for me. Not my absolute favorite Bond movie, but of the Daniel Craig movies, Skyfall is my favorite. And that leads us to Spectre, which is... you know what? Let's get into the positives before I say anything. The opening sequence is fantastic. It starts off with this long tracking shot that's one take, where we go from the city streets, inside a building, in an elevator, to another floor of that building, to a room, outside the window, across the rooftops. It's pretty great, and the cinematography is pretty good. Roger Deakins isn't on board this time, but this is the cinematographer, I believe, who did Her and Interstellar, which were two beautiful looking movies, and this movie is no different. But back to the opening sequence. It's really well done. The action scene is kind of impressive, and it has a great opening title sequence. Not as good as Skyfall, nowhere near as good as Skyfall or Casino Royale, but it definitely made the song, The Writings on the Wall, more tolerable, because when it came out as a single, I thought it was awful, unbearable. It did not sound like a James Bond song, but in context with the images in the film, it actually works. You just can't listen to it on its own and think of it as a Bond song. Daniel Craig is still good as Bond. He still has some charisma in him, and Lea Seydoux, it plays the main Bond girl, who I've been waiting for this girl to be a Bond girl ever since I saw her in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Not quite memorable, but a serviceable Bond girl, I think. Another actor who's really good in this movie is Dave Bautista, who plays the henchman to the main villain. And he only says one word, but he has this physical presence that just makes him so cool and like a real badass. I mean, it harkens back to the days of the old Bond movies when the villains had henchmen like Oddjob and Goldfinger and Jaws from, I believe it was, I believe it was The Spy Who Loved Me. I think. It's one of the Roger Moore movies, which I've never seen. But this guy harkens back to the old days of Bond henchmen, and he does a damn good job at it, without saying a word. Outside of the opening, the action scenes are really creative. They're not as inspired or exciting as Skyfall or Casino Royale, but they are really fun to watch and definitely entertaining. And in terms of editing, they're better to watch than the action scenes in Quantum of Solace. That being said, I'd rather watch Quantum of Solace over this movie. This is... What happened? Is it one of the worst Bond movies out there? I'm not able to judge because I haven't seen most of them, but it's definitely not the worst I've seen. And I've heard people say, worst Bond movie in 30 years, or Bond Betrayed. And I'm like, if you're saying that, then you clearly... I don't know why this movie keeps popping up in these reviews. You've clearly not seen Die Another Day. That, to me, is the pinnacle of shitty Bond movies. One day I will review that movie. Sam Mendes did the best he could with a shitty script, because the action scenes are really fun, his direction's good, but the script is lame as hell. It tries too hard to tie in with the other movies. And it makes, like, saying, oh, every villain you've met before, Bond, has been linked to this organization or has been a member of this organization. I'm like, that kind of makes the villains less interesting. I mean, the Quantum of Solace villain was kind of terrible anyway, but it makes the villains in Casino Royale and Skyfall much less interesting than they were in those respective movies. And in terms of the villain himself, he's played by Christoph Waltz, who I thought, all right, Christoph Waltz, he can really deliver as a Bond villain, but he just ends up playing the same role he does in any like his other movies. Like, I don't know, he just didn't come across as very threatening. And also, he's a really terrible villain, because there are a lot of things that he does that are just poor planning on his part. Like, he did not think them through at all, not think of any single little detail, and there's no big satisfying conclusion with him and Bond like there was in some of the other movies. And they really give him a relationship with Bond that is so forceful. It's a poor attempt to make this movie a lot more personal. I want to get back into Bond himself, Daniel Craig, because he still does a fine job, but there are moments in this movie that harken back to the old days of Bond, when it was more lighthearted and campy. Is that the right word? I mean, But anyway, it's more lighthearted in terms of like action than some of the past movies have. But because Daniel Craig is so serious, it just comes across as silly and not in an enjoyable way. In this movie, like, I don't know. I'm starting to doubt whether he was good in this movie. He was good in the past three movies because of the appropriate tone, but here, I don't know. His humorless personality doesn't work against some of these sillier moments. When he tries to sleep with Monica Bellucci, who's barely in this movie, by the way, it doesn't come across as sexy. It just comes across as downright creepy. Like, Sean Connery in Goldfinger could definitely get away with that because he had a great personality, but Daniel Craig, not so much. And the pacing is terrible. Like, there's some scenes that go on for longer than they should have, and the tone is awful. In the first half of the movie, I was enjoying it. It was more lighthearted than the other movies, but despite some creepy moments with Daniel Craig's Bond, I was like, okay, I'm willing to go with this. But once we get introduced to Christoph Waltz's character, it not only plummets downhill, but the tone changes to being a lot more serious, almost to the point where it's not fun to watch anymore. Now, the end of the movie. So we all heard about the Sony hacks last year, and one of the things that got leaked was that the executives over at Sony were not happy with the finale, and the writers were told to rework it, especially since it got leaked. But after seeing this, I haven't read what the original ending was, or whether what's presented in the movie is the original ending, but it didn't look like anything was changed. Like, the ending is so lousy, so absurd, so downright stupid. It reveals how dumb Christoph Waltz's character is as a villain, that it's a horrible, horrible way to end the movie. It's not as absurd as the climax of Fantastic Four, but this is, oh boy. So I don't, man, okay, I'll wrap things up right here. This movie reminds me a lot of The Dark Knight Rises, where it has a lot of really, really good moments in there. But there are parts in the movie where it's so serious that it just becomes unpleasant to watch at times. So, oh man, like, on the heels of Skyfall, this is an utter disappointment. I would want to say don't waste your money on it, because every time I think about that climax, it's pushing it. It's pushing it to don't waste your money. I'm not going to say burn in hell, because there was nothing about it that made me angry, and there were many moments that I liked. So in the end, I'm going to be generous and say watch at your own risk. As an action movie, it's really entertaining, but there's a point in the movie where once the gears shift, it just goes downhill. Skyfall ended on such a perfect note where it's like, okay, we've established our classic Bond. Now let's have the next movie have a new actor in it. But nope, this is the last Daniel Craig Bond movie we got, and it just makes me question, has there ever been a James Bond actor that went out on a high note? Well, I'm curious to watch all the other Bond movies and find out, but anyway, that's my review for Spectre. Leave a comment and tell me what you thought of the movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Like, subscribe, share me with your friends. Don't forget to check out my official website, therealmrrobinson.com. And don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, and Periscope. And this is The Real Mr. Robinson telling you, there's only one.